Hi, everyone. My name is Colin Gallagher from Swinburne University with a group of social network researchers where we're interested in the relationships that emerge within and just beyond ATSI and within chemistry and the industrial sector more generally. We're interested in how those relationships reflect and drive innovation and research productivity. So today I'll be sharing some initial findings on some collaborative patterns of research grants and direct research contracts within ATSI affiliated departments at the University of Melbourne. So for some context here, you might think of the talk by Kathy Turner earlier that gave some really focused case studies of particular relationships between academics and industry partners, or between CSIRO and industry partners. This is much more of a kind of a bird's eye ecosystem level view of collaboration. This work is done in collaboration with a number of colleagues, both at Swinburne University and Melbourne University, lab leader Professor Dean Lusher, Peng Wang, Tom Sperling, as well as Johan Koskinen, Bopa Roden, Sarah Hegarty, and also with help from Aaron and Tash. Together, our specialty is social network research, or also known as social network analysis, which can be thought of as generally the social science of social connectivity or social structure. So in this framework, we can represent individual entities such as people, teams, organizations, countries, or even in this case, research projects as part of a larger ecosystem. And we analyze and represent those entities as interlinked through specific types of relationships. When we're looking at people, we often think of ties of trust or advice or knowledge or just liking or friendship, but we can also think of just co-occurrence or affiliation, as you might find in a record, administrative record, and that's what we've done here. So we can apply this method to a range of social contexts to consider a broad range of social issues, such as, say, representation, whether it's gender representation or ethnic representation. But within ATSI, we're most interested in the idea of information flow, knowledge transfer, and collaboration as represented through network linkages. So in this particular study, we'll be considering collaboration, research collaboration, and university industry collaboration in particular. Now, there are many ways to define and represent collaboration or to think about it, whether that's through contracts and grants, publications and patents, or perhaps even in the perception of the people who are involved in the system. In this study, we'll be focusing in particular on contracts and grants. The importance of contracts and grants are several-fold, but one is that they represented a broader range of interaction types than, say, publications. There'll be a contract trace for a lot of different types of activities, from curiosity-led research, such as ARC or NHMRC projects, to direct research services. And they can also, their importance is they can also be tracked comprehensively and in a real-time basis. This is unlike publications or patents, which take a few months to a few years to show up after the collaboration has occurred. So they're useful in a few different respects. In this study, we're looking at contracted research, both direct research contracts and grants, at Melbourne University and ATSI affiliated departments over a 5-year period, 2015 to 2019. So how we analyze this data is not just visual or impressionistic, even though these visualizations can be useful, but they're not always useful. Sometimes they're quite hairball looking, and we need a statistical approach to untangle that mess. So we do so employing a particular network statistical approach that Melbourne and Swinburne are known for, to find patterns within the data, whether that's cross-sectional or longitudinal. So in this particular study, we're analyzing how collaborative patterns evolve over time. So we're representing collaboration as two partners co-affiliation with the same project. In network terms, this is known as a bipartite or a two-mode representation. And we're just looking for what are some favored patterns among academics and external partners. And just for some academic detail, this is using something called a stochastic actor-oriented modeling approach, where we're modeling actors' choices to join projects or not join projects. Essentially, what we're doing is producing a statistical model for joining collaborative research projects across time. So taking into account the ongoing nature of other projects that might be going on at the same time, that may have started in years prior and might be ongoing, either with the same partners or with different partners. In this way, we can account for opportunity costs. So in essence, so for example, there might be some perfect project out there for a particular academic to join with a particular perfect industry partner. But if they have 8 other projects going on at the same time, it might be more difficult for them to join that project compared to, say, if they had only 1 or 2 projects going on. So in this analysis, we consider a range of features of the ecosystem, of the network ecosystem. We differentiate between academic partners and industry partners, or external partners, I should say, and between grants generally and direct research contracts. We also consider a few attributes of partners, such as experience levels, and I'll get into that in a moment. So basically, we're trying to uncover certain patterns in the data. These are things like hubs, social hubs. So are there any types of academic or industry partners who are particularly active in the network? Conversely, we're also looking at projects that might be kind of hub-like. So are there any types of projects that bring together a lot of different types of project partners? What we really would like to uncover is traces of repeat collaboration. So we're trying to identify what types of nodes tend to do research together over and over and build up familiarity and knowledge with one another so that we can more reliably trace, okay, we can expect these people to collaborate over and over. So to give you just a brief overview of these findings, let me just run through them pictorially. So what did we find? We found that academics, as academics gained in years experience within the system, they started behaving a bit differently. They started to become more involved in direct research contracts. This doesn't mean they gave up curiosity-led research, but they're adding more contracts on top of what they're doing. Also, more experienced academics were more involved simultaneously or nearly simultaneously with multiple projects. So they were able to keep more balls up in the air, if you think of it as juggling. They're able to juggle more at the same time or nearly the same time. Also, more experienced academics were likely to co-participate with academics and industry partners on the same project. This is interesting because it raises, I think, what was discussed earlier in terms of the ability to talk to multiple audiences. So the ability to talk a language of other academics, as well as an ability to translate that to industry. It also raises the interesting issue of how these hubs might be able to use to spur further collaboration. So is this a mechanism by which older academics can kind of refer on or scaffold or structure collaboration between the industry partners and perhaps younger colleagues who are also part of the project? On the flip side, though, we found evidence that more experienced academics tend not to have, or are less likely, to have repeat collaboration with the same academic partner repeatedly within a short time frame. So given the opportunity to have more and more and more contracted collaborations with a particular academic, more experienced academics tended not to take on those opportunities. This suggests some sort of strategic networking, perhaps whereby grants and contracts were used to initially establish a partnership or a collaboration with another academic, but which might continue on more informally afterwards. So this is something we heard anecdotally through some interviews, that a grant or a contract was a first step, but after that, perhaps that once established, that collaborative relationship happened more under the radar, at least in terms of a contract sense, and it happened maybe more informally, as would be seen later on through publications and grants. So in terms, just to wind up, in terms of implications, we find that more experienced academics are likeliest to have, the literature suggests that more experienced academics are likeliest to have broad set of industry contacts. And this suggested that that's true and might know how to juggle multiple contacts at once and how to efficiently manage their projects in a successful way. So this spurs thinking of how can others in the department benefit from this social capital and this experience that older academics accrue over time. So are there opportunities for mentorship to be found in any of these configurations? And can we think of these mixed academic industry projects as a launchpad for young grad academics? And ATSI certainly appears to be a prime example of such a hub. However, we do have some constraints that caution us in how to proceed. More senior academics may be more strategic in how they move from project to project. So there might be some particular network strategies which benefit the individual academic, but we don't know yet how they interact with kind of this mentorship, potential mentorship role. In terms of future directions we might think of with this broad approach, we can think of network antecedents of grant performance. So we didn't include any kind of performance measure in this analysis, but it could be with this stochastic actor-oriented modeling approach, we can affix kind of outcomes to either the individual's partners or to the grants themselves and see what are the network structures which predict better grant performance. And in this way, we might get a better view of indirect or downstream benefits of particular projects. So maybe there's a particular project that goes on and it doesn't appear outwardly to have any great huge success, but maybe that's part of a more general structure that supports what is a larger, productive, profitable relationship. We want to look at more complex social dynamics. We've just scratched the surfaces here with a few simple ones. We want to make that more complex to understand how these relationships unfold over time. This will allow some impressionistic comparisons with other disciplines and perhaps comparisons among industry sectors, whether it's biomed versus food industry versus other areas of the chemical industries. And together, this gives us some concrete advice for research offices in terms of how to organize their data and perhaps share their data to get actual fine-grained concrete findings with regards to collaboration and perhaps allow for some kind of forward-looking intervention to try to spur collaboration. So that's all I have for today. Thank you. This will be part of subsequent papers and presentations. So if you're interested in following that, let me know, and I can certainly share that as they come available. But at this point, I guess I'll turn it over if anyone has any comments. Certainly you are the chemists. I'm not a chemist, so you might have some thoughts to share with me as to what you find useful or what you found questionable. I'd be glad to hear it. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Colin. Do we have any questions for Colin?
Yeah, it's Liam.
Hi, Liam.
Hi, Colin. Very interesting observations. My question actually relates to the collaboration issue between senior academics. And I'd like to know if the model factors in competition for funding in that system. So I've been in the position where I've had closely related academics competing for the same grant. Does the modeling allow for that? So you assume there's a collaboration which is beneficial, but I'm saying I've seen the other side of it, right, where people in similar areas are competing for the same pool of funding.
The same pool of funding.
Yeah.
No, in this initial one, it doesn't. So what it doesn't do is it doesn't track. These are all traces of success. So in these administrative data sets, which we got hold of, we see grant success. We see where a grant was successful. What we don't see are these attempts where someone submitted an ARC grant. So that kind of limits that sort of, that data's there somewhere, but whether research offices share it, but that would give us more of an idea of what you're saying, which is where do people go for a grant and they don't get it for some reason. On the collaborative, or on the, competitive aspect of it. I'd have to think through about how that would specifically be modeled, but certainly that's a key idea in network analysis, where who wins out, or when do two academics compete with one another, and how does that change their behavior?
Okay,
Thank you for that.
Thanks very much, Colin.